Good afternoon. It's been a wonderful honor to be part of this conversation. The ideas that have been presented are beautiful. I think they're synergistic, and I'm happy to contribute to this conversation today. So I was asked to talk about the relationships between, between equity, learning, technology, and education. That is a complicated intersection. And so I've organized my talk into 4 parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're learning about the rapid diffusion of technologies for children and families around the world, referencing reports that other people have created recently. Then I'm going to talk about some of the hopes and concerns that are represented not only in these reports, but in the perceptions of families and educators about technology, that we heard a lot about those yesterday. And then I'm going to share conceptual frameworks, because we are in such a complicated time that we need to think about how we think about this intersection. It's very easy to get into dualistic thinking about technology. It's good or it's bad, and the reality is it's much more complicated. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of design directions that are also in the paper. One I really want to focus on is how we think about designing for families and engaging families as participants in our research, because they have actually a lot to teach us. So one of the reports that I read just came out from UNICEF in 2017. And this report I would love to refer you to, because it's filled with both stories and data that reflect the serious issues that are confronting the world that intersect with technology. And some of these are what we might consider the dark side of technology: data privacy, disruption of social interaction, trafficking, and so forth. The other side in this story is really about how can technology provide learning opportunities to those young people who do not have access to schooling, or who are in schooling systems that are not really benefiting them. And if you look at this map, what they're representing there, you can't really see it very well, but the light-colored countries have diffusions of technology and internet for about 80% of the population, and they're highlighting, on the other side, the countries that really have not yet seen much of the internet. Another report that is recent, and it's comparative, is a study of 11 different countries that focused on how do parents engage with their children around technology. They interviewed and surveyed 14,000 parents in 11 countries, and some of the highlights that they want to share with everybody is that home is the primary place where children are accessing technology. They also want to highlight that in most of the countries, children are not getting much technology at school. Mobile phones are delivering a lot of the access to the internet for people, the majority, and that children are spending significant amounts of time, and I really want to emphasize this, around the world, connected to the internet, exploring their interests, engaging in entertainment activities, and we really need to understand this. So on average, in their study, they were finding that young children are spending as much as an hour a day, up to 3 hours a day, and that's on weekdays, using their technology, and more on the weekend. So it's a significant amount of time when we think about learning time to attend to. In the United States, Common Sense Media has been tracking young children from age birth to age 8 in terms of how much time is being spent. This graph is showing us from 2011 to 2017 the increase from 5 minutes a day to an average of 48 minutes a day, even for very young children. So again, significant amount of time. We see the terror and the humor in all of this in some of the cartoons we might look at. So here we have a nursery, and the nurse in this nursery has just dropped off the first mobile phone to the baby who says, "Oh my God, I just got born." We need to understand learning outside of formal education, because when you look at time, again, and through the lifespan, and this is a representation coming out of the Life Center, an NSF-funded center that we worked together for about 10 years, and we really tried to articulate why is it that we need to understand out-of-school time. In part because we spend most of our time out of schools, even though schools are dominating this conversation and many other conversations. So we need to understand all the opportunities that children have and that are lost in those out-of-school hours. So what are the hopes and the concerns? I'm going to focus mostly on the hopes right now. So when you look at the National Ed Tech Plan from the United States, and there are many other policy documents around the world that are getting created, and there's actually reports analyzing those reports, we see that there's a lot of hope because of this anytime, anywhere learning, online, flexible, access to information, and excitement about the possibilities for all kinds of marginalized young people. Some of the things that are pointed to are open access to a wide range of learning resources in terms of information, whether it's videos or games or just Wikipedia. Then there's interest in those who have special needs. How does hardware and software allow people who could not communicate before really express themselves and maybe access information that they could not access before this technology was invented? Third, there are so many new tools for creativity and content creation. All of a sudden, people can express themselves in new ways that may have the possibility of influencing innovation everywhere, and so it's democratizing creation of content. That's the hope. And then we have new capacities for simulation, scenario-based problem solving, virtual field trips, games, all these new kinds of experiences that can come because of the advances in technology. Now, unfortunately, when we look at the data, here's what we see so far. Open resources don't necessarily lead to more equitable access. The data that we're beginning to see suggests that those who already have more education, more money, affluence, better tools, are being able to take advantage of those open resources, those MOOCs, other kinds of resources. Second, schools are inconsistent in providing the kinds of opportunities that we want to be providing, not routine drill and practice, which are useful and important and essential in some cases, but really we want to see the empowered, creative, inquiry-based use. Turns out that the studies that have been done are showing that those opportunities are given to wealthier students on average. So we need to attend to this equity concern. And this is true even in innovation hubs like Silicon Valley, where you might think that everybody, because of the diffusion of companies, is creating and having access to the best, most enriching experiences. It turns out that all of our old suspects, gender, race, socioeconomic status, are coming to play a role. And so when we think about digital divides, we have to think about intersectionality. And we cannot assume average differences. So a final issue is that the expectations for these creative, critical leadership capacities are increasing around the world. When you look at the World Economic Forum, when you look at OECD, everybody's talking about these as these are the goals. Beyond traditional literacy, beyond domain knowledge, we need to do more. So I'm going to share, I want to bring some youth perspective into the room, so I'm just going to share a little bit. What images do we have in mind? What might these exemplars teach us? And I'm going to share the case, the story of Greta Thunberg. Now, these two Time magazine covers, on the left is Mark Andreas, who has definitely been an inventor and created lots of wealth. This is many years ago, 1996. And on the other side, we have Greta. I'm interested in her story to illustrate some insights that we have about the science of learning and the cultural nature of learning. I'm going to read this quote. "I first started learning about climate change when I was maybe 8 years old. In school, when my teacher started showing us pictures of plastic in the ocean and starving polar bears and extreme weather events, those pictures were stuck in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about them. When I was maybe 11, I became depressed. I stopped eating, I stopped talking, I stopped going to school. I got out of the depression by thinking to myself, there is so much I can do. Okay, so the sense of self-efficacy. So let's unpack that a little bit. She said a lot of things in that one statement. One thing, she talked about her interest being sparked in school. Okay, that's essential. But then she became depressed, right? Again, emotion, it's not necessarily positive, but it's strong, and it's gonna inspire her. At age 15, so years later, she wrote an essay for a competition in a newspaper, and it won. All of a sudden, she started getting recognized, and she had adult attention surround her. Next thing that happened, these adult leaders who were already working on climate change invited her in to their circle, and they arranged brainstorming groups, creative thinking groups around climate change and the role of youth. She went to these groups, and she got inspired by somebody else, the Parkland survivors, Emma Gonzalez, and that whole group of young people who stood up and said, this is not okay. They created a school strike. She decided to take that very idea, and she turned it into action. She was alone. Her peers didn't want anything to do with this in the end. She dropped out of the group. She did it on her own. And then she used social media to broadcast what she was doing, and then again, she got attention. This coordinated work led to a lot of collective action. When we look at her timeline of influence, from the time she started skipping school in 2018, that first protest, to now, she's given numerous speeches, she's published a book, and she's created, basically, with other people's help, a global movement. This is a graph of Fridays for the Future strikes, and what we see here is across more than 100 countries, we see people taking on her activity. What does this mean for education, right? One thing that it means is that when we think about education in this global learning ecology, it is not just schools. We actually have young people who are contributing to this, and maybe in some more powerful ways than even adults are. How do we understand this from a science of learning perspective? In the sciences of learning, increasingly we realize that learning is social. It's also biological, neurological, and so forth. But when we think about this case and others, learning involves not just transformation of knowledge in the mind, it's a change of how we participate with other people and in the world. Social interactions are what drive learning. Joint attention, collaboration, coordination. There's a central focus on identity now, interests, agency, and engagement. In the field of education, we tend to focus on standardized test scores a lot, but it turns out that all of these other factors that we never assess or measure are really part of what drives learning. And so this leads us to really want to focus on practices. I'm going to move more quickly now because I see the time is going. A big insight, it is not one experience that ever makes a difference. Maybe once in a while you have a transformative experience and it changes your whole life. More often it's the accumulation and the confluence of many experiences over time. And the implication is that we need to start early and provide rich experiences for everybody. How do we think about this in terms of design? That was a case of in the wild, activism, powerful learning. So one thing that we know that we can do, and this is based on empirical data, is we can try to catalyze this kind of interest-driven learning that's going to be sustaining itself in school and out of school. And we look at this in terms of programs like citizen science, media arts, robotics clubs. We can see lots of data. What are the conditions? So here are 4 conditions that help if people are interested in design. 1, projects that give roles as authors, as people who are doing inquiry like we heard today, as people who might have a political role to play, who might be a helper, who might be a teacher. And we give these roles to young people, and they can take it on, and it feels authentic to them, and so it's transformative. Second, all children and adults need access to resources, including ideas and role models and time. These are some of the things that we don't often count when we're thinking about equity, but they're key. And then connections to learning partners. So again, back to the social. How many ways do we learn with people? Sometimes we learn because we teach others. Sometimes we learn because we're collaborating. Sometimes we learn because someone has connected or brokered a connection to a resource for us. They hand us a book. They hand us some media. They curate something for us. And then when we have an opportunity to share with a broader community, that often bumps up learning. So these are 4 conditions that we know about. How do we think about the markers or the outcomes of that kind of interest-driven learning? Again, we can't measure these easily, and it's too bad, because they're the kinds of things that we want to engender in young people. So what we see, and we can think about Greta, when you get passionately committed to an issue, an initiative, we see things like creating a new project, right? So she created a new project for herself. It led to other projects. We see the choice to participate in reading or an informal activity or even forming a relationship with somebody as a learning partner. That's something that is an outcome of getting authentically engaged. We also see sharing expertise. So those young people who become more engaged and passionate about a topic, and they get a little bit of depth or just enthusiasm, they tend to share it with their parents, with their peers. So as we think about intergenerational learning and the message of thinking about families, we need to realize that learning involves becoming a teacher, even in a small way. So where can we design for this? Everywhere, right? So one of the big insights when you look out of school is that every single opportunity that you can imagine, whether it's being in a faith-based institution, a community center, a school-based area, in the family is an opportunity to get a little bit more learning going. I want to turn now to intergenerational learning and the opportunities for families. And here, what I want to say is that we, as researchers, need to be looking at what's happening every single day around us in families. Those hours of technology use that I talked about, they're being brought into families and they're being used for an incredible range of activities. Some good, some not so good. It can be entertainment and Disney movies for hours on end, or it can be a broader range. And one thing that I really appreciated about this report from Global Kids Online with their 14,000 participants is that they're starting to show the correlation between the way that a parent engages in technology and the breadth of activity. Parents who are too restrictive are restricting the range of activity. Parents who sit and explore with their child are getting more out of the technology. So what kind of research do we need? We need quantitative research, like surveys, we need experiments, but also we need ethnographic studies that show us how technologies are being taken up by families and children, and the role of values and expertise. And I'm just going to share a little bit about this. So we started trying to understand what do we know about shared attention as opposed to split attention with technology. As opposed to Sherry Turkle's alone together, how does media look when it's shared among family members or siblings? Spontaneous or designed, because joint attention is what drives learning. So 4 different practices we see, and these are not equally distributed, but they're powerful, and so they're important to emphasize. We see parents and children using the internet to collaboratively learn about a topic that one person's curious about, maybe. School can be a source of that. We see media creation and media production, and I'm just going to go right to some examples. So here is a 6-year-old child with his father at home, and they're sitting with a mobile phone. This is the father talking. He also asks a lot about Cesar Chavez, about Martin Luther King. Washington, about all of them. Because I imagine at school they mention them, and he comes home and he wants to see what they're like. And online there are videos and photos. Sometimes there are videos where Martin Luther King is talking, and that way he gets an idea of who he is, and he starts realizing who the person is, who they are. So they're doing what we call a collaborative interest-driven search. It's a topic that the child has brought from school. It's expansive. It's quite interesting. Here's an example of connecting a nature experience with technology. My kids love hiking and stuff. We recently went on a night hike and looked at some of the constellations. Eva asked us what Orion looked like because we were pointing out Orion, and she didn't get it. So we pulled that up on the phone and asked her to look at it. So making a connection between technology and the real world, expanding each other. We also see that parents are curating to varying degrees. This is an example of a family where the parents are Spanish speaking. They want their child to learn Spanish, and so they're doing a lot of focusing on applications that can help with Spanish development, but also they're using it for their own learning in English. And so we are seeing lots of examples of this, and it's a powerful learning experience that doesn't get captured.
¿Cómo podrías ayudar a la tierra? Es reciclar, usar muchos tipos de... Cuando vayas a la playa, muy bien. Eso es una cosa buena. Puedes reciclar cosas, no tirarlas al mar, porque hay muchos animales y la pueden comer y se la ahogan. Se quedan ahí y nadie quisiera eso, porque los animales pueden hacer algo bien para nosotros. Nos dan comida.
This is her brother inserting his opinion.
Y también, por favor, díganle a sus padres, amigos, y que sepan esto muy urgente. Nunca vayan a matar una ballena. Ya no hay muchas.
So this is an example that comes from my former student Amber Levinson's dissertation work. It was several years ago. And we hear, again, climate change, care for the earth, for animals. And this particular inspiration of her taking on that role of reporter is actually coming from media. So from a show called iCarly, where a young child is looking at a media star and wanting to take on that role as a reporter. And so, again, this is a father speaking. I try to tell them that because I've always loved music, photography, film, videos, and making videos, you can start making your own video with a phone. That's why Naomi is starting to want to report and record. So again, we're seeing this family influence and expertise come in subtle ways, interacting with the technology. Again, providing an interesting opportunity for learning. So the research I just talked about is based on small-scale ethnographic work. We're now trying to just extend the method using diary methods that you can actually use your mobile phone to now collect examples every day. And what we're seeing, and I'm going to be skipping over this because we don't really have time today to talk about it, is how within a period of 2 weeks we were able to recruit hundreds of families and have families volunteer to share every day what they saw about their child learning. And we're seeing fascinating examples and parents willing to share and also having many, many questions. They want help finding content. They don't know what's right, they're navigating safety, but they're really willing to share, suggesting that there's a whole new opportunity for parent-to-parent learning, facilitated, of course, by other people, but giving examples. So this is an autistic child, 8 years old. The mom's very excited that he can use technology and interact socially using games and things like that. A young girl from Los Angeles, 10 years old, within 1 week of diary entries, she had searched about the fires that were facing her community in LA. She had looked up how to carve a pumpkin, and she had done it step by step. She had used an app to make video. Great diversity of activities, quite rich and very connected to school, and also doing school assignments. I see I have 35 seconds left, so I'm going to skip that one. The third design direction is to build opportunities across settings. So this is very much an ecological view, a systems view of the future of education. We can no longer just think about schools. We need to think about school, after school, and we have to absolutely think about parents, because they are, of course, the first teacher, and many, many years and hours, if we were to do the calculations, are being spent with all kinds of technologies, and we need to make sure and capitalize on that. We know that technology is not enough. We've known this for years. It's important, but it's a social technical system. We always have to understand that the human-centered interaction is more powerful, and there's a great opportunity to engage that. I want to make a pitch for research in this global pact. I think that if we want to really advance our collective understanding, we need to put money into research and capturing the everyday innovation and the designed innovation that's happening. And in particular, we need to have research that will inspire design, support reflection, and enhance communication among those who are really in charge of the education of young people. Thank you.